Welcome to the Jungle Discipleship School podcast. My name is David Small, and I'm going to be your host on this podcast journey today. And I'm super excited for what we've got in store. We've got a great interview today with my dear friend, Mike Riley. And I'm actually down in Phoenix right now visiting him and his family. They're great people. And Mike's just got an incredible story. He's been a great friend of mine for more than a decade now. And he's served in some of the hardest places in the world to some of the poorest people in the world as a missionary and teacher. And I just think he's got a lot of wisdom and a lot of cool things to share and just different ways of thinking about the world and thinking about how we serve other people. And so I'm super excited to welcome Mike Riley to the podcast. And this will be part one of this interview. And then next week, we'll put out part two of the interview. So you can tune in next week for that. So without any more delay, here's my conversation with Mike. Okay, I'm joined on the podcast today. See, that's like a professional way to introduce the podcast.
Oh, nice. Nice job.
I'm joined on the podcast today by the world's dumbest human. No, I'm just kidding. This is my dear friend, Mike Riley. And Mike, how many years have we been friends?
I think 12, which is probably 12 too many, but that's all right.
Yeah.
12.
In Burma, I have many younger brothers, and in the world, I have a real older brother, but I don't have many like spiritual older brothers. And so you're kind of like an older brother. However, I caveat that by saying you give the worst advice.
Oh, man.
The one time you told me to date that girl, and even if I broke up with her, she would at least feel good that somebody wanted to date her. That's bad advice.
Well, I'm not a dating coach, but it was okay advice. It wasn't bad. It was okay.
Yeah, that's true. You should be a dating coach.
No, probably not.
But you're married.
Yeah, that's just by the grace of God. That's proof that miracles exist. That's all that is.
And your wife, DJ, she's amazing.
Yeah, she is.
And how many years have you guys been married?
Oh, shoot. I should have done this math before. 22, heading towards 23.
That comes after 22.
That's a long time.
And you got married when you were 55, so that makes you in your 70s?
I don't know how old I was. 29.
29?
I think I was 29.
And you have two amazing kids.
Two awesome kids. An 18-year-old Will, and a 16 going on 17-year-old Susie.
Could you imagine when kids get married when they're like 19 or 20? Like, could you imagine Will getting married next year?
I mean, I can barely imagine him going to college or tying his shoes straight. So, no, I can't imagine him getting married.
Okay, before we get too far, let's start at the beginning. Where were you born?
I was born in New York, but that was only there for 6 weeks before my hippie parents moved to South America.
Oh.
Yeah.
Where?
6 weeks. Then we went to Argentina. We were out in the middle of the Pampas for 3 years.
What was your parents' job? Why did you go there?
So they were kind of hippie missionaries. And
that means like you smoke a joint and then share Jesus, or what?
No, they were hippie in the things that were boring, and conservative in the things that matter to me. No, they just were kind of a generation of people who wanted to serve Jesus but didn't have a plan so much. Or if they had a plan, it didn't work out. So they went down there, worked at a discipleship training school actually down there, and lasted about 3 years, heard about the work in Spain, and said, let's go to Spain. So we went to Barcelona and ended up being in Spain for 12 years. Okay,
so in your first 15 or so years, how much time did you spend in America?
I bet you if you total it up, it's maybe a school year.
in 15 years?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. And so you really were raised mostly in Europe.
Yeah, mostly in Europe.
You're South America, you don't remember?
I remember a bit of it, but just
Where were you?
little pictures. Argentina.
Okay. This is Spanish speaking or a Portuguese? Spanish.
Your geography is superb, man.
Well,
Spanish.
Brazil, they don't speak Spanish.
No, but they're the only country that speaks Portuguese. So you went and picked the one.
While Portugal
in South America.
Okay. I'll edit that out because it'll make me sound dumb. I'll keep in everything that makes you sound dumb. But okay, so then from there, okay, Spain. What was it like growing up in Spain? Where, in Barcelona?
Most of it was in Barcelona, but then we moved to a little city in central Spain, and then we moved to a city on coastal Spain, just north of Portugal. It was awesome. If it was up to me, actually, if it was up to my parents too, my sister, we would not have moved back, but we had to. We didn't have much of a choice.
Why?
Because Spain is better, for one.
But why did you have why did you have to move back?
We had extended family that was ill. My grandmother, and she had no one to take care of her. So that was one of the big reasons for moving back. And then we got back and realized that me and my sister knew nothing about America, but we're close to going to college. So we ended up just staying.
So, okay, I have many questions, but your parents what kind of mission work were they doing in Spain?
So they were always closely aligned with church, but they worked a lot with who are called the Roma people now. Back then we used to call them, I think it's not politically correct anymore. We used to call them gypsies back then.
Oh.
So the Roma people in Spain, they used to travel around, as you've seen in the movies, and like.
Do they call them
carts.
Roma because they just Roma around?
No, that'd be a good joke though. They call them Roma because they're originally from the Romania area, from what I understand, according to Wikipedia. And so they traveled around. They were rough people. They heavy poverty, heavy oppression. My parents loved them. My parents thought they were fun.
When I was in England, when I lived in England, growing up in Canada, I had thought about a gypsy as just somebody who kind of goes around and doesn't really have a place to call home. But then when I moved to the UK and they have gypsies and you call them a gypsy, it's like a real identifiable people group with a very unique way to dress and a very cultural and ethnic thing.
Yeah. Yeah, growing up in Spain, we used to think of gypsies as a bit of a derogatory term, but it actually is like a people group. Like they got their traditions, they got their structures, they got their way of living that's been passed down from family to family. And when I was living there, I don't know if it's any different, but when I was living there, they were definitely an oppressed people. They were definitely looked down upon.
I mean,
really
I think
poor.
they're still looked down upon.
I think so.
Would they have been a traditionally Catholic group, or what kind of religious?
So I think traditionally in Spain they were traditionally Catholic, but they didn't. They weren't very fervent. They didn't go to a lot of churches. At one point, if I understand correctly, the charismatic church in Spain was the fastest growing church, and it was mostly Roma people who were converting to the charismatic church.
It was mostly your mom and dad who was that was their at work efforts.
No, my parents, no. It wasn't them. God bless them. Yeah. Great people, but not them.
How old is your sister? Is she older or younger?
She's about a year and a half younger.
Okay, and so was she born in South America?
So she was born in Argentina, out in the Pampas, in the middle of nowhere.
Wow.
And
that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And so you and her, just the two of you?
Just the two of us.
And you grew up mostly in Spain, like elementary school. So were you speaking Spanish fluently?
Yeah, Spanish was my first language. It's not my best one anymore, but apparently the story is that I learned it. I learned English when they put me into a private British school because my Spanish overwhelmed my English, and my English was so bad that they thought I needed some proper school. And so That's the story I remember hearing growing up. I can't vouch for it though.
Okay, and then when you moved back at what, were you 15 or 16?
Almost 16, yeah.
And you moved back to America?
Yeah.
Where? To Philly?
North of Philly.
North
about
of Philly.
an hour and a half north of Philly. Yeah.
Next to Will Smith.
An hour and a half north of Will Smith.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's disappointing.
Yeah, it is. I thought you were cool, but
No.
so okay, because you identify Philly as your hood.
Yeah, but that's a defense mechanism. My mom's family is from west of Philadelphia, and it's easier to explain Philly
Yeah.
than to say, well, I was born in New York, raised in Argentina for only 3 years, in Barcelona for 7 of the 12 in Spain, and Cáceres and Vigo.
But really, I'm from Philadelphia.
Yeah, so it's just easier to tell people I'm from Philadelphia.
But you have a Philly mentality. Like
I do.
You have
'Cause
like a rough around the edges.
Yeah.
But still want to fight for the underdog.
Yeah.
Love each other, kind of.
That's because I went to college in Philly. And going to college in Philly, so I would say in high school, I did not have a clue really what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Played soccer, so I had some tribe there, but I wasn't really in tune yet with the States. But when I got to Philly, that's when I started to understand it, and that's where I found my place to fit in, because it was a multinational city. There was a lot of people who were struggling. It was blue collar.
Yeah.
It was rough around the edges. And I understood that kind of reflected back on the Roma people. And so I felt that's the first time I would say in the States that I really felt at home.
And you felt connected to people in the country.
Yeah, to the people, the city,
okay,
all that stuff.
Be honest. Have you ever run up the stairs? Is it the museum where Rocky ran up the stairs and raised your fist in the air afterwards?
I ran halfway up, had to take a breather, do some calisthenics, stretch, then ran the other half.
Cardiac arrest halfway up.
Got to the top, and I was like, man, that was overrated. No reason for doing that again.
Someone should sell like a Philly cheesesteak.
But to my credit, I ran all the way down the stairs.
That's good.
So,
do you like Philly cheesesteak?
I love them.
Oh,
I love them.
Yeah, they're good. Can you? Okay.
How do you eat them?
I don't. I spill them all over my shirt and lap. That's how I eat them. What do you mean, how do I eat them?
Well,
is there different ways?
Yeah.
See, I'm not a Philly.
You got to go on Wikipedia before you go to Philly next time.
Well, I went to Philly because I did an internship with the Philadelphia Flyers.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Did you know that?
I'm not sure I did. How long did that last before they booted your soft?
It wasn't a real. It was a. So a coach mentor. I had a coach mentor of mine that was through Hockey Canada. There was like a mentorship program, and they paired young up and coming coaches like myself with higher end coaches that were NHL caliber. And the great Wayne Fleming was the assistant coach of the Philadelphia Flyers at the time. And he was my mentor coach, and he invited me down. And so I went and spent some time there. Not long, just maybe a week.
Okay.
But yeah, anyways. And Wayne became my mentor coach because the NHL was on lockout, and I was working at a hockey school at the time, and we went down to Texas and we were running a hockey school, and Wayne came along as part of our like VIP coaching staff, and he was a very serious guy. And we were at this restaurant, and he was like some kind of middle of the road diner type restaurant. And he went to the bathroom, but it was one of those restaurants where they clang pots and pans together and sing for you if it's your birthday. And while he was in the bathroom, I told the waitress that it was my grandpa's birthday, and he would really love it if they sang for him. And when he came out of the bathroom, they all clanged pots and pans, and it was a bit of a risky move for me because he either could be like not interested and like not think it's funny, or he could think, oh, this young punk, he's got some spunk, and he liked it. He went the other way and he liked it. He thought it was, and so then he ended up arranging through Hockey Canada to be my coaching mentor and inviting me to Philly. And
so what year about were you in Philly?
Oh, I have no idea. A long time ago. I stayed in Chestnut Hill. Do you know
Chestnut Hill.
Oh, it's beautiful there.
It is. That's one of the nice parts of Philly.
Cobblestone streets. Yeah. It's like a whole nother area.
Yeah.
And they actually don't play, or they don't practice in Philly. They practice in Voorhees.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
And and so anyways, I would drive to go to the arena in the morning, and At first I was taking the train everywhere, but I got scared because I thought I was going to get mugged. And so, but anyways, yeah, I was maybe 2001.
Okay.
Could that be? Yeah. Anyways.
One time I took the train in Philly, and I was waiting for my train. I was headed to the Northeast where I lived, and I was afraid I was going to get mugged on the train. So I just took cash because I thought I need to get down there. I need to do some things. So I had enough cash to go down and get back. And went down there and went back to 30th Street Station, was waiting for my train and fell asleep on the bench. Woke up, I'd been mugged. Every single bit of cash.
No.
Yeah, no, I'm not kidding you. Every single bit of cash was gone. I had no way to get home. And I'm in central Philly. But here's the thing about Philly is that people are actually nicer than they come across. And so I just went up to the ticket lady and I was like, I literally have no cash, but I need to get to whatever station it is in Northeast Philadelphia. And she was like, okay, we'll just write your name and address here and send us the money and when you can. And I was like, really? That's it? She was like, what else are you going to do? I was like, I don't know. I don't have any other answers.
Oh my gosh.
And so I took it and I showed them the piece of paper when the ticket collector came through. And the guy was like, make sure you send the money in.
Did you send it in?
I did. I figured, you know what, man, they were nice about that.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a lot of money.
That's the kind of thing, you send it in and they'll keep doing it. If you screw them over, then they're not going to do it anymore. And
exactly.
That's good of you. So, okay, after high school, you graduated high school in Philadelphia area.
North, an hour and a half. Yeah.
And then you decided to go to university right away or what? Or did you take time off?
Yeah, no, I went to university right away. I don't know why I did that. I went in, studied education.
Okay.
Because I watched Dead Poets Society.
Oh, yeah.
And thought for sure I was going to be an inspirational teacher. Graduated, taught for 2 years, and I was a wreck. I was miserable. It was horrible.
My dad did the same. My dad taught for 1 year and then became a carpenter.
I don't know if you've seen Dead Poets Society, but not a single student stood on their desk for me. They had fights in class. They didn't do their homework.
Where did you teach for 2 years?
In Trenton, New Jersey.
Okay.
So that probably explains a lot of it. But have you been to Trenton?
No.
Okay. Good on you.
But, okay, so then after 2 years of teaching, what did you decide?
So I got tired of America, wanted to go back overseas, thought I was going to go back to Spain where I grew up, but still had this persistent heart for oppressed and poor, kind of like the people I grew up with. That had grown while I was in the States and in Philly, that heart for oppressed and poor people. Worked at a couple places that worked with poverty in Philly. And just wanted to go back to that. But I thought I was going to go back to Spain because it made sense. And that was my first lesson on how things that make sense aren't always the right thing. And so as I was making sense and getting ready to go back to Spain, I heard about a people group in the middle of Central Asia called the Uyghur people. Uyghur.
Can I buy a consonant, please?
It's what?
I'd like to buy a consonant.
I know.
Alex.
They sound like a tropical disease. Like you go to somebody and say, I got the Uyghurs, man. And people are going to ask if you have like a lotion for that. But they're a Muslim people group in Central Asia. Estimates vary. That between 13 to 15 million of them. You'll hear different numbers. But they're Muslim. They live in a lot of the countries that end with stan, and they're nomadic. They were nomadic at one point. Marco Polo talks about them in his journeys as he's traveling through that area.
How did you stumble across? Like, what was your first? Do you remember the first time you ever heard about them or read about them? How did it come about?
There was I started working for a nonprofit. And one of the staff members there was interested in him. He was an older British gentleman, and he challenged me. He said, I know you want to go back to Spain, but I just want to challenge you to come on a trip with me out there and see what it's like. So I took him up on it, and I went out to Central Asia, and immediately fell in love with them, their way of life. I don't know what I feel about calling, but if there is such a thing as calling, I felt it then. And remember saying to myself, I was single at the time. Remember saying to myself, well, this is it. This is what I do. This is what I do. End game. No stop to this. So I decided to do that. I was going to go over as a single guy. And all of a sudden, someone gets in touch and is like, hey, there's this single girl in New York City who is interested in the Uyghurs.
Sounds like
and
trouble.
in my misogyny, I thought to myself, okay, well, this is going to be a fail because there's no way somebody who lives off Times Square is going to make it in the rough and tumble Central Asia deserts and mountains, working in yurts. And
is this DJ, or are we talking about DJ, or is this another girl that broke your heart? And
no, we're talking about.
Well, because
we're talking about my wife.
Yeah, because she's actually like tougher than you.
Yeah, she's tough as nails. But back then, I didn't know it.
Yeah,
I was just working off some emails and stuff.
Yeah.
And thinking this girl lives off Times Square. No way, man.
So is somebody trying to like set you up here, like on a date? Is there matchmaking, or are they just saying,
no, I don't
coordinate your ministries together?
I don't think he was even that hopeful for me. I think he thought there's no chance. So he just really wanted me to go up and show her my PowerPoint presentation on the Uyghurs. So it was a heck of a PowerPoint because we ended up getting married. So
right after the PowerPoint ended?
I tell you, it was a good PowerPoint.
Wow. This is the Uyghurs. This is me without my shirt on, flexing.
That would have gone the opposite way.
So okay, I wish I'll have to get DJ on the podcast one day because she's cool. But okay, so how old were you when you got married?
29. So yeah, I went over, checked it out, went on my own.
Yeah.
Came back, was convinced, and then met her. We actually had her go over on her own to check it out without me.
To just see
to see if it was
something
her burden. Yeah, and she fell in love with the people. Came back, we got married, and about a year after that, we were off and moved to Central Asia.
Okay, so I just want to say for our listeners that some of the discussion may be vague, and it'll be purposefully vague, and for those in the Christian world, they will understand the vagueness and be able to read something between the lines, but we'll keep things vague for certain security reasons. But you and DJ went to Central Asia, and you're working with the Uyghur people, and in your mind, you thought, how can life get better than this?
100%.
If there's a calling, you've found it and you're doing it, and there's this beautiful lady and she somehow married you and is with you, and you're both doing ministry together, and life is perfect.
Life's perfect.
And that goes for how long does that honeymoon phase
last? It was
last?
about 4 years. We were doing all kinds of exciting and adventurous stuff. We were this part of the world has some of the tallest mountains in the world, Everest and Karakorums and K2. And I think
beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah, I think 5 out of the 6 tallest peaks are in this part of the world. And then dune deserts like the Sahara, not as big as the Sahara, but it's very close. And so that combination is just amazing. Our life was one big adventure. And we did all kinds of projects. We did some English teaching. We did some AIDS awareness, wrote some curriculum on community development, partnered with some agricultural nonprofits, and we're working in orchards down south. We did a whole bunch of stuff, and the governments, we didn't know this, we're not happy because the Uyghurs are oppressed. They're a minority.
Are they oppressed because they're Muslim, or why are they?
That's part of it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's part of it. That's a big reason actually in some of the countries. But they're just a minority. And minorities, I mean, it's like when you're back at high school, if you're a boy, you pick the weakest link and everyone teams up against them and you join them because you know if you're going to pick on that person,
They're not going to pick
they're
on
not
you.
going to pick on you.
Right.
And so it's this wolf pack mentality that even these
The countries.
the
as a whole.
countries and Central Asian tribes have, and so we were working with them. We were really loving life, and then and we started to get some bad signs.
Wait, before we get to that, did I have two kind of questions. My first question is, I'm curious where Will came along in that timeline, that kind of 4-year timeline, and then I'm also curious about did you have any experience working with Muslims before, and how did they receive you, and how was your experience working in an Islam-based culture and Islam-based community?
All right, so I'll answer the Will question quickly. He's my 18-year-old son. So he was born during our time there, but we came back to the States for his birth.
Okay.
For medical reasons. It was too dangerous to have him there with my wife's blood type. She's O negative. And at that point, I don't know if they do now, but then they didn't differentiate blood types. So if there was too much bleeding, they didn't have the O negative blood that she requires. So we came back for him and then brought him over when he was 6 weeks old. So it was kind of a repeat.
6 weeks old.
6 weeks old.
And he was back into Central Asia.
That dude's running like in our apartment in his diaper, and Muslims are coming over and holding. There was a Mongolian restaurant that we used to go to, and the first time we went with Will, they tried to take him from us to show him around, and we were like new parents. We were like, no. Second time we went,
show him around.
Yeah, to show him around. Second time we went, they went to take him. And we were like, okay, well, just keep him in the restaurant. Third time, we were like, let's go to the Mongolian place, free babysitting. They took him out of the restaurant, took him to their house to show family. And we just ate, had a good old time eating Mongolian food.
And they're showing off the little white baby?
Yeah, showing off the little, the little pale dude. And everyone, we're hearing people say stuff like, never saw one of these before. And we're
especially in that area.
So we were like, okay, can we have another serving of noodles, please? So we took him. Concerning Islam, well, I found a couple things. I found that some of my prejudices were probably wrong, and I think I came to the conclusion that Islam may be, I wouldn't say this definitively, but it may be the closest faith, as little as Westerners like to think, Western Christians like to think this, it may be the closest faith to our Christianity. Like something like 75% of the Bible is also read by Muslims, though they have different changes in it.
There's like 70 or so, there's a large number of Old Testament prophets that all the same exact stories show up in the Quran.
Exactly. And the Gospels, they call it the Injil, and they read them. They have some changes. They've changed some things in it, in my opinion. The letters of Paul, they think Paul was a wise man. I can't remember if they think of him as a prophet.
They thought Jesus was a prophet, too.
Thought Jesus was a prophet.
Right.
So they value his words. And before you know it, almost all the Bible is considered holy writings by Muslims, but not to the level of the Quran. And they believe that the Bible us Christians use has errors in it that were purposely changed. So you can't just show them your study Bible and have them totally accept it. But
had you worked with Muslims prior to going there,
never.
Or had you taken a course before you went over?
Yeah, I ended up taking online a couple Muslim theology classes.
Okay.
Just to kind of prep myself a little bit, but they were worthless because we get to the Uyghurs and we find out that the Uyghurs are actually they're like backslidden Muslims to somebody in Saudi Arabia. Like they incorporate a whole bunch of Buddhism. There's this one, I remember this one little mosque in a canyon. It was built into a canyon wall, and if you went into the mosque in the right the right teacher was there, they would let you go behind this curtain where there was a little tunnel that went into the rock. And the tradition was that Buddhists tried to kill Muslim mullahs, or teachers, and they hid in that little tunnel. And so now it was a bit of a local pilgrimage where you could go and you could sacrifice certain animals in that tunnel for blessing. And outside of that little mosque or pilgrimage site, there was a prayer stick where barren women could go and rip off a little bit of their dress and tie it on there and become fertile, which is not Islam at all.
Right. Oh, okay. Yeah. I see
And so they're
incorporating these practices.
Yeah, they're incorporating practices. But yeah, we just kind of fell in love with them.
Were you accepted into the community, or did it take a lot of work or time?
No, it didn't take, honestly, with the Muslims, it didn't take much time.
You know, like if I go to Burma, you're just like instantly, especially now, I'm like instantly accepted. But I know that there's other places and other ethnic groups where it takes you a long time before they trust you to let you into kind of the inner circle. And so with the Uyghurs, it didn't take long.
Honestly, big picture, I don't think it was all that long. Like they were pretty desperate for outside contacts. They were pretty desperate for friends. Their language is difficult.
They have their own dialect. I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, it's a Turkic language. It's
okay.
It's closest to Turkish, modern day Turkish. But I remember being in Turkey and using Uyghur, and they all laughed at me because they said it sounded like Shakespearean English.
Oh, okay.
So it's an old version of Turkish. But no, they're amazing people. And they want friends. They're more, this sounds bad, but I wonder sometimes if they are more oppressed than they think they are. Things have gotten really bad for them recently. But there's a list, and I can send you the link. I don't know if you could put it in podcast notes or something. But there's a list of companies that use Uyghur labor without them being compensated for it. And you'd be shocked at the companies on it. I'm not going to say what companies because I don't want to get them wrong and have you get sued or something like that. But it is companies that you and I
have
use.
No money, so come at me.
Yeah, well, then I don't want to get sued. It is companies that you and I use on a daily basis. Like I look around this room and some of the companies right here, I see them and that. And they use Uyghur labor for them. And so the extent of their oppression is sometimes I wonder if it's bigger than they know.
Well, you have this heart for the underdog, for the downcast, for the oppressed people, and it really started in Spain, right? Like it was really you saw your parents modeling this love for people that no one else loved,
right?
And you saw that and thought, like, there's something about this that this is just right, and that's carried with you your whole till now, to your whole life, right?
Yeah, definitely. That's the genetics behind it. I remember I can't account for this story because my mother has passed away, and sometimes stories grew in my as my mom told them. So they maybe started in one place, and then when you heard it right before she died, it was a completely different place. But I remember our second city in Spain. My mom used to put bags of food, hang them on the outside of our apartment's door. And Roma people would come and get them. And they were hated in that second city in Spain. So time goes by, and right before my mother died, she told me that we were on a no-hit list, that the Roma families in that city, I said we were off limits for any begging or any crime. And the reason behind that was because my mom use of herself put food out because she cared for these kids. I had friends who were Roma or gypsies, and I remember they used to come over, and the first thing they'd do is eat. My mom would feed them, and I was just annoyed because I wanted to play.
Right.
And and then now as an adult, I'm like, yeah, my mom fed them because she knew they didn't have much food. So I can trace it back to there. Now, I sometimes wonder how exaggerated were these stories, but it didn't really matter because it led me down this path. And so, yeah, I attribute my parents and that combination of living in Spain, also probably living in Barcelona with its separatist ways and it's in that environment made me a little bit of who I am.
If you think about your own faith, obviously you get a lot of that from your parents. It's kind of and your upbringing, but where did your faith you really feel became your own and became solidified in your life?
It's a good question.
Thanks. That's why they pay me the big bucks.
So I think it would have been sometime during college, but that's where it became solidified. That's where I learned some good theology. Not all that I necessarily agree with nowadays, but it got me thinking about God and bigger picture. And it got me, one of the key things that happened was a friend of mine and actually my sister and I, we ran a youth group. And so we weren't just going to college, we were running a youth group at the same time. So there was ministry happening at the same time. And I remember that connection really solidifying some of the faith. I think, though, in a lot of ways, my faith took on new dimensions after college when I was overseas. And I started to see some of the desperateness of the situation. I started to realize that even though I was overseas with the Uyghurs, they were not as existentialist as this sounds. I was going to leave someday because you can't be there forever or you die. And they were going to be in not much of a better situation because of what I did. So I remember thinking, this has to be more than just Mike and DJ heading over. And that led me to something called liberation theology, which often gets a bad rap, but is nothing more than, at its essence, than the belief that God loves the oppressed and the poor, thinks we should prioritize them, and has it as part of our task in kingdom building to fight for the poor and the oppressed. So I remember running across that and reading all the original authors and understanding it and saying, this makes sense to me. Sometimes it's maligned because some of the original writers had ties with communism. But to me, a lot of what they were teaching, not everything, made gospel sense. When I read the Sermon on the Mountain, say, that's what they're talking about.
Right.
And so I think that period during that time in Central Asia, when I was putting the theology I learned into practice, that's when I started to really, everything started to congeal.
I mean, I always found it interesting because Isaiah says, seek justice, help the oppressed, defend the cause of orphans, and fight for widows.
Yep.
And I'm always
pretty clear.
I'm always curious about the words and the translation. You know, I'm reading it in English, but it wasn't written in English. And it says seek, like the adjectives that are used, like seek, help, defend, and fight.
Yeah.
And it's like, these are strong adjectives to action words here.
Action words, exactly.
Seek justice, help the oppressed, defend the cause of orphans and fight for widows.
And the concept of seeking justice, to me, means that you're not just sitting around waiting for it to land on your lap for you to do something.
Right.
You are seeking it out, which means
I'm going to
proactive.
find the injustice.
Yes, exactly. And I've had a lot of grief about this because
I like it.
Liberation theology does not fit North America.
It's uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable, and liberation theology does not fit our desire to increase. In America, we want to increase. We want laws that shave off taxes so we can have more money, so we can get more, or we can be safer. That's
right.
That's the West. I shouldn't even say America.
I mean, it's funny because if you're really honest about it, you think, okay, yeah, tax cuts are good because it means I'll have more money. And if we're really honest, nobody thinks, oh, because then I can give more money to this cause that I'm really passionate about.
Right.
That's not the. I mean, okay,
exactly.
Maybe that happens a little bit, but if we're all honest with ourselves, it's that I will then be able to be more comfortable, have more stuff, acquire more things.
100%.
And it's not about going. And so, yeah, you're right. It does.
And so there's a little bit of. I think there's honestly a little bit of self-delusion, and I'm not without my hypocrisy in this, because I work hard to be as safe as possible,
right?
And to have it. So I'm counting myself in with Western society, but I think that's true. I think we work hard to be as safe as we can be, to have as much as we can be, to be able to have as many toys as we can be. And if there was such a thing as a tax cut that forced us to give whatever tax cut benefits we get to the poor, we wouldn't vote for it.
No,
we wouldn't vote for it.
Yeah. And
so, so when all of a sudden you're confronted with some of that stuff, I try not to argue too much because it's pointless, but I did argue this one.
You argue
recently.
all the time.
I argue with you all the time. But I had someone say that my views were liberal and leftist because the Democrats care for the poor. And I said, so be it. Because it's the second most talked about topic in Scripture, fighting oppression and helping the poor. So it's actually originally a Christian thought.
Right.
And if under its Christian thought, it falls Democrat, well, then I'm a Democrat. If it falls Republican, I'm a Republican. If it's communist, I'm a communist. If it's a capitalist thought, I'm a capitalist. Because at the center, the key thing is it Christ's teachings? And then after that, who cares where it lands?
Right.
You follow it.
The rest of it is made up by human names.
The rest of it is made up. Categories made up by us. And so I struggle when people are like, you shouldn't think that because it's liberal, or you shouldn't think that because it's conservative. Right. I'm like, you should only.
And we're in the business these days, especially of lumping everybody into categories.
Yeah.
Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, right, left, and if part of your view is in one category and part is in the other, it doesn't matter. You just get lumped in wholly to one category. And so
I just saw
we have these labels.
Yeah. I just saw this amazing post. I can't remember where it was. It was I think it was on Facebook. A friend of mine working in Africa said something about someone was doing their electrician job, got zapped because of the poor infrastructure, lost the fingers on their hand, and if I get the story right, then couldn't work because they had no fingers as an electrician, and had to disassemble their house to sell the wood to be able to buy food to eat. So, in my view, you help that person.
Right.
Whether that means you're a communist, Democrat, capitalist, Republican, you help that person. And I just cannot imagine getting to heaven someday and having Jesus ask me, if this is how it works in heaven, hey, did you help that dude who lost his fingers because he was trying to feed his kids? And me saying, No, you know why? I registered as a Republican. Sorry about that one, Jesus. I just struggle I struggle to be able to sleep at night thinking that I'm going to have to answer that question. So, yeah.
Okay, I want to shift gears for a second and go back
Are we
to...
recording?
Yeah, we're recording.
Oh, sorry.
We took a small pause there to refill our... What are we drinking? Ramen
Kool-Aid.
Ramen Kool-Aid. We're drinking Kool-Aid. No, not ramen Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
Just Kool-Aid.
Just Kool-Aid.
This is a PG podcast. Okay, so I want to back up. I think it's really interesting, especially the way... Okay, so I always think about when you look back on your life, you see this, I use the word tapestry of things and events that God is orchestrating or putting you in, and it all makes sense later. And even, like you and I we did some work with the Rohingya,
Mm-hmm.
and you and I were down in the south of Thailand, and that was for me really the first time that I ever worked with Muslims near Hat Yai.
Yeah.
And we took the youth down there, and I remember they were the most beautiful. What was her name? Who hosted us? The woman, Nee, and she was just the friendliest, most amazing woman. And then I remember going to Malaysia, and I spent a little bit of time I went to a mosque and just tried to understand what's going on because I grew up, and I'm 10 years younger than you.
Yeah.
11 or 12
10.
or 15.
Let's go with 10.
Let's go with 10. 10 years younger and more handsome than you. But so I grew up in small town Canada where there's no Muslim people. It's not my first interaction with, or not interaction, but my first experience of hearing about Muslims was 9/11.
Really?
Yeah, like that. I had never ever had a reason to think about Islam or encounter Muslims prior to 9/11. And I remember like people in America, and you were like seeing on the news that Muslims were just getting attacked or beaten up after 9/11 because they just blamed all Muslims for the World Trade Center. And so you instantly are influenced by what you see on the news and what the culture and the society is saying. And the culture and the society after 9/11 was saying Islam equals terrorism. Islam is bad. And that was honestly the only experience that I had with Muslims. And then you took me down to Hat Yai. How many times did we go together?
At least a couple.
I mean, we did probably
you
two.
You went once without me, I think.
But you and I went once without the youth as well.
Yeah.
So I probably went 4 times down there.
Sounds about right.
But I think I would not have been able to do the work I was doing with the Rohingya had you not taken me down.
Interesting.
To Hat Yai.
So I should give a little primer on the Rohingya, so anyone listening, all 2 of the listeners may know who they are. The Rohingya,
hi, Mom.
The Rohingya are a Muslim people group, and it's debated as to where they originated. Some people, not good people, would tell you Bangladesh, but a Rohingya person would tell you Southwest Myanmar. And the Myanmar government does not like them.
No.
And wants them out or wants them dead. Those are the 2 options. And so they've tried to drive them out for years, and a lot of them fled across the river to Bangladesh and are in Bangladesh right now. So,
and that's where we went to see them.
And that's where we went to see them. Yeah, you're right. Some of the big camps in Bangladesh.
Okay, but we're getting ahead of ourselves here.
A little bit.
What was it like raising your son in infant
Muslim
days
areas?
Not only Muslim areas, but in like Central Asia? Like, it's totally out of the context of what everybody would imagine about raising a kid.
It was good. We only
were you afraid? Did you have
a
times?
bit?
Yeah,
a bit, but not because of Muslims, but because of the fact that we were if I have it right, if I remember correctly, like an 8-hour bus ride and then a 4-hour flight to the nearest Western hospital. And so
Was it hard for DJ to have?
I think so.
Yeah, hard, like,
Yeah, I think so. But she's she's a tough cookie, and we trusted that God had us there, and so I think that was big. But it was a little difficult raising him there because of that fear of a new parent.
mm-hmm.
But there was others who did it as well in that region of the world, and so you always could look to them. And quite frankly, there's like you sit back and you think, well, there's people who have come through this area long before I did, centuries before I did, and brought their kids. And every single Uyghur raises their kids in this area.
Right.
So why am I, who am I?
Right. Why are your kids better than their kids?
Yeah, exactly. Why are my kids better? And if God protects every single, he doesn't, well,
here we go with
theological.
Theology.
Yeah, that's a tough one. But if Uyghurs can do it, you can't really say if Uyghurs can do it, I can do it, because they have support systems in family and they know customs and we don't, right? So it may be tougher in a sense for us, but the bottom line is that Uyghurs do it and other foreigners have done it. So
I always, being a missionary these days is, let's say, I'm not going to say easy, but it's much easier than it was in the days of, you say goodbye to your family and you pack your coffin and you're never coming back. Like, you're going to be Hudson Taylor and say, like, hey, I'm going to China and that's it. I'll see you in heaven kind of deal. And now it's like, okay, I'm going to jump on the plane. I'll be home. And so it's a little bit of a different scenario, but I always just kind of had respect for those people that were like, I'm going to be with this group of people and either I'm going to die there or God's going to call me somewhere else, but that's it. And I
100%.
always have respect for those kind of missionaries. And I feel like we've lost that in the modern missions world.
One of the best pieces of advice someone ever gave me was, if you are moving to an area, research and read the biographies of those who went before you, because I guarantee you that person said it's a lot tougher than what you're going to put up with. Like when we were there, even though it was early 2000s, you still had Skype. Skype has just gone the way of the dodo bird, but I could still call my parents.
Right, you could do a video
with them.
That's pretty amazing.
They could see Will growing up, and so like the first people out there, man, like they didn't see their families for like 15 years.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Like that's insane.
Yeah, I remember reading. I don't know how to say his name, Adoniram Judson.
Yeah,
and he was the first missionary to Burma, one of the first missionaries to Burma. And I remember reading his biography and thinking, oh, he was there for like 20 years before he saw his first convert to Christianity. Yeah. And I thought, okay, that's good. I still got some time to do something here. But it shows you like, and like his wife died, his second wife died, his kids died, like everyone in his life died. And I just remember thinking like, well, that was in the 18 whatever, and it's still the same.
Yeah.
Everyone you love dies in Burma. And I was like, frick, man.
So true.
It's still that way.
It's so true. I remember one day really in Central Asia, really bemoaning myself and wondering about my missionary biography and, how I was going to write chapter 7 about how I liberated people groups and all that, and really being in a bad mood because I couldn't get Diet Coke. Oh. Mind you, I could get Coke.
But not Diet Coke.
But not Diet Coke.
That's hard.
And so I really sat down. I was really in a bad mood because of this. And thought hit me. I was like, my biography is going to suck. Like, it's going to suck. But in chapter 8 is titled, When Mike Couldn't Get Diet Coke.
Yeah. The whole ministry fell apart.
It all fell apart. And so
trying to save them.
Yeah, I just remember thinking, All right. You're a little soft. Just admit it, Mike. And yeah.
How many years total did you stay in Central Asia working with the Uyghurs?
We were about 4 years. I mean, we left for like Will's birth, but like the period that we were focused on it was about 4 years. And then we had to leave, not by our choice, by government's choice.
So, okay, I don't want to use too many details, but a government forcefully requested that you leave.
Yeah.
What was that like? Like, how did it play out?
Well, honestly,
They just come knock on your door and say, "Hey, time for you to go," or what?
Yeah, I came back from a trip. I went to register my passport, the same place I registered it everywhere, and it was clear there was problems. We started having police drop by often.
Police just show up at your door?
Just show up. My landlord got really nervous and asked once to, he said he had to get a deposit from me for a crazy amount of money. I asked him if he would sell the apartment to me, and he said, yeah, I'll sell it for you. I'll sell it to you for less than a deposit. And it occurred to me that he wanted us really disconnected with him to the point of a financial loss for him.
He didn't want your name associated with... He didn't want
associated. So then I started thinking, well, he's been visited. I remember I'm crossing the street in a little town that no one spoke English, and this guy came up to me and said in almost accentless English, "Hey, I'd like to be friends with you. You look like you're American." I remember thinking to myself, okay, you start getting a little paranoid.
That's not sketchy at all.
Yeah, you start getting a little paranoid.
Do you think they're watching all the work you're doing?
I think so.
Like 100%, you think?
Yeah.
And then what about, do you think they tap your phones or listen to your internet or read your emails? Yeah.
I don't know how far into emails they would get. They'd have been really bored if they were in my emails. If they watched me on the internet, they'd have learned a lot about Spanish soccer, but not anything much more than that. But they definitely followed. They definitely followed us, and they definitely knew who we were.
So then, okay, you went to register your passport, and what happened?
And they sent me to. They said you can't register. You have to go to this police station, and they were the bruisers, the big guys you don't want to meet with. And they sat me down for I can't remember how long, and just asked me where my money was coming from, why was I there, who did I know.
What do you say? Like, is it legal for you to be a missionary at that point?
No.
So what do you tell them you're doing there?
Well, we were doing community development there. Mm-hmm. And so
you can go down that road.
Yeah, you can go down that road. But the problem is that the oppressor never wants the oppressed to be developed.
Right.
So in retrospect, I was young then. In retrospect, I'm like, well, I was never going to work with them.
Right. So even if it wasn't a missionary thing, you're still not.
Right.
Yeah, you're feeding their enemy.
I'm feeding their enemy. I'm like, I'm telling, when the oppressor is like, why should we let you stay? Why are you here? And I'm like, well, those people you hate, I'm helping them. Well, that's a one-way ticket out. So, but in my youth and zeal, like I didn't really fully understand all that stuff. And so
Where was Will and DJ while all this was going on?
They were at home.
Okay.
And I remember I sent one text message saying, I can't remember what I said, but it was hopefully to alert them that I was in a little bit of trouble.
Prior to your passport getting, like, you had some suspicions that you're being followed, or was that
there was a trend? Time? There was a trend happening there with other nonprofits and stuff, and so if I can remember back, I think I thought I had dodged a bullet, but I didn't. I maybe dodged it right into the path of a bigger bullet. But here's what's amazing.
I mean, they're not stupid.
They're not stupid.
No. The enemy is...
I mean, can you imagine if you put that into U.S. context and someone from Central Asia moves to... It's hard to have a similar... Like, Okay, someone from Central Asia moves to, let's use your Canada as the Yukon Territory. And they got a ton of money. A lot more money than you ever will. And they're there setting up all kinds of computer systems and they're just there. They don't have an apparent job.
Right.
They're just there to help people they've never met before. The U.S. government and the Canadian government would be like, who is this person?
Yeah, what's going on?
Let's even up it. If they are Muslim and they move to the Yukon Territory or they move somewhere in Alaska for U.S. purposes and they got a ton of cash, and they go back to, Saudi Arabia every 2 years or Iran, let's say that. Well, our governments would suspect, right? It's just the way it is.
Right.
And so I think there was trends, there was things we were eager to help, and we didn't probably fully understand everything. But I don't know.
How did the actual deportation go? So was it voluntary or was it like?
So they told me after some chats that we had to go, that our visa would not be renewed. We were getting student visas. All the student visa options dropped really quickly. We got contacted by several schools where we had been talking to, and they said, no, you can't get a visa, a student visa at all in this region. So I was looking at trying other things, and we left the country and came back. That's when I had to register my passport, and they ultimately had 3 pages of paper in front of me that said, you got 30 days when this visa expires. I only had 30 days, and you have to go, and the day you go, you have to sign these papers saying you've gone. But I couldn't fully read them.
They're not in a language. They're not in English.
No. And so we had to, I knew we had to book our tickets out. We had 2 suitcases each. We tried to sell what we could, got rid of what we could. And the day we left, I didn't sign the papers. I didn't show up to sign them.
You just left.
We just left because I didn't really know what was on the papers. I didn't know if there was some of my Uyghur friends' names on there. And I was getting them in trouble. So we just left. And yeah.
It's hard when from the time that I met you, you had always had a heart for the Uyghur people. And even years down the road, I could tell that, the love that you had for them, you didn't just be like, oh, okay, well, we got kicked out, and so that's that. It was like, how can we go back? How can we still help them? Oh, they're in the news. I want to know all about it. And it's hard when they take that from you.
It is.
And there's nothing you can do, really.
I had about 4 or 5 years ago, I had something happen, though, that was good. It was good for me. There was a town in that part of the world I wanted to move to. And in my Indiana Jones kind of mindset, I was like, no foreigners lived in that town. I want to move there. And there's a little bit of white savior mentality in there, and a little bit of a whole lot of pride. And I remember thinking, I want to move there. I want to be the first foreigner to move to that town. But it didn't happen. I have a master's in education. And I remember meeting with the education committee and saying, your English teachers don't know English. Let me move here and I can teach them English. It's like your science teachers don't know. It's silly.
Yeah.
So I thought I had a definite, and they just blocked everything. So time goes by. We have to leave. And it must have been 15 years later. I'm talking to someone who also had connections to those areas. And he said, were you looking at moving to this town? I was like, yeah. And he said, well, here's something funny that happened. Some people got in, not allowed to live there, but they got in and they went to the mosque and they saw 2 mullahs sitting outside, and they went up to them, and these mullahs said, you don't have to worry about us. We're followers of Isa at this mosque. Isa is Jesus. said, we're Esau followers here. And we've always been Esau followers here. And that's what we'll continue to be. And so then all of a sudden you find out this mosque is just the followers of Jesus in this small little town.
And the whole thing is kind of a show.
It's kind of, yeah. It's
like they're imams in a mosque, but it's...
Right. They're what they call contextualized Christians. And I remember hearing that story and thinking to myself, you know, maybe God in his omnipotence was like, oh, Mike wants to move there. He's going to screw up what I've been working on for so long that I got to block him from moving there. Because I got something far bigger than that dude can do. And I remember that kind of congealing in my head and putting a little bit of context into having to leave an area that you love. And thinking to myself, okay, the only way this is a tragedy, leaving this area, even though it is a tragedy, but the only way it's an ultimate tragedy is if all this work depends on me. If it doesn't depend on me, then it's not necessarily a tragedy.
Right.
I just got to sit back and be okay with it.
At the time, like, what, you're in your 30s?
Yeah.
Did it affect your faith when you thought, like, here's my calling, here's my place, I've got my wife, I've got my boy. Did it hurt? Did it rock your faith to think, like, what, Jesus, you've got me kicked out of here now? Like, what?
100%. But it did because I had bad theology. So it rocked my faith because I remember thinking, well, what's the point? I thought you wanted me to go help these people, and I'm one of the few who actually did it.
Right. There's not like a big line of people going to say, I want to go there.
You know, they're not in demand. And thinking, now you've blocked me. One of the few people who want to go. But that's based on the assumption, first of all, that I could actually do something. And it's based on the assumption that nobody else was as cool as I am, which is really false.
Really false.
And it was based on the assumption that, like, if nobody went, that God couldn't do something. Who's to say he couldn't do something with nobody there? You know? And so all those bad assumptions in my mind did send me into a bit of a tailspin. Struggled with it for probably a couple years. But now I look back and I'm like, you know, you talked about going to the Malaysian border as opening to working with Islam. Well, that was my opening. I wouldn't have gone to the Rohingya or the Malay people in southern Thailand. And then when I was working in Syria and Iraq, I would not have done that my experience with the Uyghurs.
Right.
So, yeah.
It was an initiation.
It was an initiation. And I may never get back there. I have to be okay with that. But I can definitely say this. 4 years isn't enough to really make a difference there. But the Uyghurs sure made a difference in me. So ultimately speaking, as bad as it sounds, you know, like I benefited. I'm not sure they did.
Well, I remember every year we took the youth group down to the Muslim village there on the border. And I remember in the debrief, we had a couple debrief days at the end. And I remember every single year, one of the youth making the comment of, I feel more blessed by them and by the way they received us and the love that they showed us than what we were able to give to them.
Yeah.
And so I can totally get that. Okay, we're going to leave it there for today. And we'll pick this back up next week. Thank you so much for tuning in. I just want to say one thing about Mike, and I'll say this again at the end of next week, but Mike's and his wife DJ, you know, they served as missionaries for most of their lives overseas, and missionaries don't make a ton of money. And Mike's oldest son, Will, is going to be going off to college in the fall as his first year in college. And big bills, big expenses. And I'd love to give a gift from the Jungle Discipleship School to Will and ultimately to Mike, who's paying for college. But so if you feel led to give some money, you can donate it through junglediscipleshipschool.com/give and just send a note along with it saying this is for Will Riley's college fund. And I'd love to be able to give $1,000 to support Will's college. And so if you feel led to support Mike and that and Will and the whole family, please give into that cause. I think it'd be awesome. But make sure you tune in next week for the rest of this story about from Mike, and some amazing things continue as he transition his work into the war zone of Syria. So tune in next week. Thanks for being with us. God bless you.